So today is a very special day. I'm super excited to be here with Johnita Due, who is the EVP Integrity and Inclusion for CNN and TNT Sports. I have to say, it only took me 5 takes to do that. Welcome. I think I'm so excited, a little too excited to be here with you today. Johnita, we are going to be talking about a very important topic today.
Thank you so much, Sheryl. It's a delight to be with you as well. And listen, it's exciting to have the opportunity to talk about topics like this.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about giving voice in our society and also giving voice in our organizations. But before we jump into this important and also timely topic, I thought I would ask a little bit about you. What inspired you to greatness? Was there a person? Was there a situation? Can you tell us first a little bit about you?
Thank you so much for that. And I assure you, I don't walk around my house or my office thinking that I'm great, but I certainly have always wanted to make a difference. And I really have been most inspired by my parents. I mean, you can imagine growing up in a household with civil rights leaders, and they literally changed our country. And they were committed to every one person making a difference in some way. And so seeing that example, growing up during the summers, instead of going on, regular summer vacations, we would go to the annual NAACP conventions and things like that. I mean, we started attending banquets with some of the civil rights groups very early. So I had to learn all of the right, etiquette and where the knives and forks went, and whose glass belonged to whom. And it's just that kind of leading by example from my parents was so important. My mother led the first jail-in of the nation during the civil rights movement. She was only 20 years old. She was a FAMU student. And my father studied law. He became a freedom lawyer. He's still living. My mother is deceased, but they together were just an amazing duo, formidable duo, and fierce. And at the core of what they did was their dedication to making a difference in society.
I did not know that. Well, what an amazing life experience and life education.
Yeah.
Up in examples. That is truly incredible. Well, was there something specific, that really inspired you? I mean, you said your dad is, a lawyer as well. Was there something poignant? And there were probably dozens of things, I'm guessing, but is there something that is really imprinted in your memory?
Well, I've hosted events, and some of my dad's community partners and leaders have hosted events honoring him. And I've heard all of these lawyers talk about how much they inspired him. I saw my father as a lawyer, and I knew that the law was often used to affect change. And so I think I just connected the dots. Well, if I want to be a change maker, I can do that by studying law. And honestly, I didn't know what else I wanted to do. For undergrad, I studied psychology, focusing on race relations and intergroup relations and social change theory. But after college, I just felt that that was the natural next step, not intending to be a public interest attorney necessarily. I grappled with that. My mom in particular, though, was just so influential, and she was very firm. She's like, Johnita, we've done all of this, so you don't have to necessarily become a public interest lawyer. You don't have to necessarily become a civil rights attorney. She said, we need you in the boardrooms. We need you in the classrooms. We need you all over. And so that gave me the freedom to pursue other kinds of law. And what I was most drawn to was media law. And I look back and I think that I would never be able to be any other kind of lawyer. I mean, so I became a media lawyer by training. To be honest, I barely took any constitutional law classes. I probably took, obviously con law. And we learned about the First Amendment and constitutional law. But beyond that, I didn't study media law. It's something that I learned over time, and I learned how connected it is to giving voice to others.
That's so interesting. And so I just want to talk, have you elaborate a little bit on what your mother told you. She really gave you the platform and the permission, not to
Yeah.
say that anybody needs anybody's permission, but maybe your journey would have taken longer if she didn't have that conversation, if you would have thought in your mind that there were certain expectations, and it could have taken maybe decades for you to really honor, what was in your heart. So how important was that talk and that permission?
Oh my goodness, it was crucial, right? It was really crucial because, listen, I grew up seeing the work of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, all of these public um, service and public interest organizations making a difference. Literally, that was what they did every day. They would fight discrimination. They would advance equality in housing, education, employment. I mean, listen, that's what these groups did. And seeing my father as a community lawyer out in the community trying to affect change. In Miami, we grew up in a very multicultural city, which was just really rich in terms of exposure. But, with different groups, you often get sometimes intergroup tension and conflicts. So seeing him navigate all of that. And so I've always felt that committed to those areas, but I just wasn't sure, right, if I wanted to work as a public interest attorney or civil rights attorney. And really just my mother was an amazing woman. And she made it very clear that I can make a difference wherever I ended up. And she was so right in terms of sort of that next stage of the civil rights struggle would be in corporations, it would be in academia, it would be in other areas. And as you see, it's a lot of companies have been crucial in supporting those efforts. And so it's very interconnected, but as you said, just giving me that freedom just made my choices possible.
Yeah, and it's as you speak about your parents and specifically your mother's fight for freedom, it wasn't just about civil rights, it was freedom that she showed you as well. So sounds like she was a woman of her word for sure.
Yes, definitely.
And so, well, I would imagine that it was not an easy or a straight shot, ascending to where you are today. So, can you share a little bit? I mean, I love interviewing leaders such as yourself and working with Olympians, and I'm always amazed by the resilience and fortitude that it takes. So, can you share a little bit about the mindset that's allowed you to keep going? Because I'm guessing that you've been a couple times in rooms where you were the only, or people are telling me they're not only the only, like a double only or a triple only, and so what has allowed you to persevere from the beginning of your career to the ascension where you are now?
I will try and make this quick.
Okay.
It wasn't a straight shot, right? And just to be transparent, after I went to law school, I went to work in a sort of Wall Street law firm. It was on Battery Park Plaza, but still it called itself a Wall Street law firm. And I was a litigator, a junior litigator. And before that, I had convinced the firm to allow me to do my first year as a pro bono fellow working for an anti-racism organization in Italy. So I certainly was tying my background and experience in psychology, studying race relations, in intergroup relations and social change. I studied similarly that in England and got a master's in that area. And so I knew as I said, I went to law school. I wasn't sure what to do with my background and interests, but the law firm did have that fellowship program. But sort of after that first year, I walk in, I'm in this however many story building, and I'm just a little discombobulated, right? Because I certainly wasn't seeing myself as a litigator. And certainly I didn't see myself as continuing in corporate law forever. But just having those mentors, people who knew that I had interest in publishing and media, who were able to put me on, one or two cases connected to that. So a few years later, I was in a position to look for an opportunity in-house as an inside counsel. That was with the McGraw-Hill companies. I was selected for a role where I did everything from litigation to working on First Amendment issues and copyright issues and intellectual property. And that's where I really just gained my great love for media law. And so I went from the McGraw-Hill companies to CNN, where I was able to do that kind of work full-time, 24/7, around the clock, as a content attorney, and tying it to giving voice. I mean, you think about it, as a news organization, our responsibility is to make sure that we are informing the public. We're doing so in a way that's based on accuracy and facts. We're combating misinformation and disinformation. And to do that, you need to work with your editors and producers to shape and produce the best stories possible. And you also have to advocate for access to information from local, state, and federal governments. And so that's a part of giving voice. And I feel most importantly, it's representation, making sure that you are reflecting communities across the board in your storytelling, so that, as a global news organization, it's our responsibility to reflect the world. And by doing that, you're incorporating it and advancing the voices and the diverse perspectives that come with those voices around the world. And so that's why everything came together, and it made the most sense for me to be a media lawyer. I'm not doing that now, by the way. So back to your question of sort of how does your path develop? I think that working so closely with editorial teams, I developed a lot of relationships, even though I'm based in Atlanta. I developed strong relationships with our editorial teams in New York and LA and other parts, and also, London and Hong Kong, right, across the board. And so when there was an opportunity to name, I guess, an inclusion leader in the last several years, I was provided that opportunity. Now, I worked in the inclusion space since 2005 for prior presidents, but that ascension and becoming a member of the executive team formally was really important. And then also the relationships, I think, led to me being named the head of integrity, which, and you didn't ask really, I don't think a lot of people have the title EVP Integrity and Inclusion. And so just to explain what I do now, our standards and practices team reports into me. And so that's the integrity piece. And our inclusion team reports into me. So that's the inclusion piece. And leadership understands that there's a bit of overlap between the two, right? Because as I said, as a news organization where you want to ensure that you are reflecting the world, that means encouraging diverse perspectives across the board, including diversity of political perspective. It means going out into the field, talking to people in various communities and seeking their perspectives about what's going on around them. And so that's, to me, so fulfilling, because that is our way of my way of being able to help give voice to others.
That is so amazing. I feel like every company should have you, somebody like you in your role, and it should be more commonplace. And so, well, let's then talk a little bit about the subject at hand, and that is giving voice in our society and organizations. Do you want to first start off by why this is why so important for individuals, but also why it's so important for our society and our organizations?
Yeah, I mean, listen, let's speak at the individual level first. And literally, there's a discussion earlier today, which is, how do you create a culture, right, of respect and empathy, where people feel as if they belong? And the key to that is creating a safe space for people to use their voices. And people may want to use their voices to share ideas. They may want to use their voices to give feedback, or they may want to use their voices to raise concerns about something. And if, organizations and companies are not, and leaders are not committed to creating that space, then we're not going to have the most productive employees. We're not going to have the best content out there. And so, I used to say it this way. I used to say that I've always been driven to give voice to others, which really means that you're representing other people's voices. But several years ago, I stopped saying that. And I really say it this way. I'm committed to empowering others to use their voices. There's a really, really critical distinction there, right? It's not me representing other people. It's creating that culture where people really do feel empowered and safe to use their own voices. That's the only way we're going to be successful as a business.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And if you look at, well, you're probably well versed in the psychology too of why it's important, but like one of our, if not our most important biological need is safety. So how can we innovate? How can we speak up? How can we be high performers? If we don't have that safety. So I guess the follow-up question would be, what is the best way for organizations to create that safety? I mean, for anybody listening, thinking of, oh, we might be falling a little short here, which means that we might be missing out on ideas. Maybe our retention is not good, and maybe it's because of that, or, they're a little worried. Where would be the best place to start? Or if I were to reframe that question, where's the most important place to focus on?
I think there are a couple of areas. I think that you need a universal commitment to that type of culture as a value, right? It needs to be clear to employees, clearly stated that it is a value, that we are going to empower other people's voices, empower people to use their own voices. And there has to be that commitment from the top. It has to be socialized. For the first time, CNN's leadership has created a culture charter, and just, around various things, including ensuring that employees feel comfortable using their voices. And so that's the first step. You have to kind of put your stake in the ground. You have to declare it, and then you have to live it, obviously. And so the next piece is making sure that it's uniformly practiced and enforced, right? I mean, and the way you do that is to assess what leaders are better at it than others. I mean, that's a really important part of the equation, because obviously there are going to be some leaders that are more accustomed to leading by empathy and inclusion, and then others may just show up differently. And so just making sure that we all hold ourselves accountable, that's really, really important. And once you've sort of declared what your cultural values are, and then you enforce them and hold each other accountable, that's going to go a long way.
Yeah. So it sounds like really defining what giving voice means, before you even declare them. Is it important because different things mean different things to different people? So is it important to really define what it means?
Well, I think it is. I mean, like I said, there are different ways employees may want to use their voices. And, working for content creators, I think one of the most important ways, and one of the ways that one of the things we all need to listen to, is sharing their thoughts and perspectives about our content, or about stories, about programming on the CNN side and the TNT Sports side. Like that's how you get the best ideas. So if people feel like their ideas are welcome, that's only going to improve the content. And so you certainly need to ensure that people understand, yes, we want your voices. We want you to use your voices, and we want your voices to be heard. And that really will be reflected in the content. But it's just as important for people to in addition to, obviously content ideas, any sorts of ideas or perspectives connected to any meeting, it's really important for there to be that that open culture, because otherwise you're functioning in a bit of an echo chamber. And what's the point of having so many different backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences in an organization if people aren't sharing those insights day to day, right? Ranging from the content to like, oh wait, no, maybe this this product, meets the needs of these kinds of consumers, or maybe should the research is showing, this is a little different, or it's received differently, or again, and this is important as well, the feedback piece, where employees feel as if they can share feedback about anything, ranging from whether it's the content or leadership, right? I mean, it's really important.
Yeah, and I also think too that, for the younger folks coming in, a lot of times, or I think about, my daughter, she's 25, so she just got a new, her first corporate job, and, the CEO came to her and he said, we're a 50-person company. The last time we hired someone was 3 years ago. We were really depending on your fresh eyes. So she was really surprised and taken aback, but also that young people really understand their value and the importance of their perspective. And it's not always easy to go against the grain, especially with your boss or a skip level or something like that. So I really love that you were talking about that safety, especially, and probably that culture needs to really be communicated from the top.
Definitely. And generational diversity is so important, because, we're legacy companies, really need the fresh and new ideas, because it's the younger generations which are determining consumption habits and how content is consumed and received and what they're interested in. And so that example that you just gave about your daughter's boss, I think is incredible. And we have many leaders at CNN and TNT Sports who feel the same way.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm going to ask you a question that might be a little uncomfortable, but it's, what are the consequences if companies fail at this? Not just fail. I think failing's the wrong word, because that assumes that they've tried. I mean, what if companies, and I ask this because I've worked with amazing leaders whose companies or leadership or board do not see the importance. So what are the consequences of companies not taking this seriously or disregarding it?
Well, listen, I believe that corporate America has really been a leader in many regards, around a lot of areas, and I've seen companies take seriously their cultures. I've seen them take seriously inclusion. I've seen them take seriously workplace benefits to support employees. And I think that voice, if you want to talk about voice, the voice of corporate America is very important, to help shape society, right? And I mean, there's so much risk across the board if companies are not investing in positive cultures for their employees. I mean, listen, work is going to get done, products will be made, content will be produced, but I truly believe that we want our society to thrive, and that takes enthusiasm, and it takes supporting and developing employees. And I don't think these are areas that can be put on a back burner like that. It's integral to the success of companies. And I do believe that overall companies realize that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it boils down to that. Well, of course, it's fair and just, but it also boils down to dollars and cents, as well. So, well, along those lines, if you're an individual listening, can you share like a takeaway or a call to action? If someone's thinking, okay, I'm working in my company and the company's changing or trying to change, but maybe it's too slow. What is an individual, female leader or male ally or what have you? What is a call to action or something that you can share with listeners as individuals?
That is such a wonderful question. And yeah, I mean, companies are changing all around us, right? The industries are changing, the media industry, everything is changing all around us, but not necessarily changing to the point of your question fast enough as it relates to creating positive cultures. And, employees can get a little burnout, they can get a little demoralized. They can lose trust. And the way that you, as an employee, can feel that you can make a difference is to use your voice. Like you have to use your voices. You have to advocate to management what your needs are. And I know it's easy to say and do that in a way where you're not afraid. It's easy to say that. But at the end of the day, I mean, your voices and your work are what make the companies successful. And so just making sure that you are continually advocating and using your voices and not giving up, and finding allies is wonderful. It's also important to ensure that you are not self-eliminating, and I'll explain what that means. And I talked to my daughter about this, especially if you're working and you just feel as if maybe you're a little stagnant and you're not seeing the growth that you want. Sometimes we self-eliminate ourselves from opportunity. And I always say, never say you can't do this or you can't do that. Like never. Just don't even just say, well, I'm not good at that. Never say that. Never say you're not good at something. Like we can all learn a lot of things. We're not always going to be the best at everything, but we can always learn. And instead, go for it. Go for what you want. Make those connections, develop those relationships, go for what you want. And then maybe somebody else may say, well, this isn't for you, or you're not ready for that. And, if they're the decision makers, you have to accept that, but you don't have to let that get into your head. Never let third parties tell you what your worth is. Okay. So just go for what you want. Don't self-eliminate. And if it doesn't work out, that's fine, but you still know what you bring to the table. You still know your value, and you just have to continually advocate for yourselves.
Yeah, I love that so much. If you didn't hear that, is do not let a third party tell you what you're worth. Own your worth, speak up. And Johnita Due, this has been some really invaluable nuggets, gold nuggets of wisdom. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to following your amazing journey.
Thank you so much, Sheryl. Thank you for all that you do. I really appreciate it.